All right. All right. Thank you all for joining me in tonight's discussion. This week, we're going to talk about supply chain metrics and key performance indicators. And I hope, as with last week, we can have an engaging discussion so we can talk about the content and the weekly lecture and kind of align it with your experiences within your organizations. So to get started, this week you're going to be reviewing chapters 4 and 5 on metrics as well as cost and quality metrics. And also, you're going to continue to work on your IntelliPath assignments. And again, you have up until the end of the term to submit any late assignments. So if you have fell behind for whatever reason, you do have up until the end of the term to do that. Now, you do incur a 10% late penalty, but the good thing is you're able to submit all your work. Once again, check your originality scores. I have not had an issue with that from anyone, so thank you for that. But once again, continue to check those because great minds think alike. So, as we are working on a number of similar topics as with other classes, always suggest to spend those 2 minutes to run all of your documentation through the originality check. So, in this week, in terms of metrics, really quick, what is your definition of a metric and what's your definition of a key performance indicator? Anyone? Okay. So, metrics, so people will confuse or combine the terms metrics and key performance indicators and use them interchangeably. But it'll measure performance exactly. But I would say that those metrics are more short-term measurements. Okay, and the key performance indicators are those long-term strategic measurements. Okay, I also say that metrics are inputs into key performance indicators. So, for example, metrics. And if you all work in certain environments, you may have metrics based on customer complaints, orders shipped, things like that. Where key performance indicators would be overall parts per million. From a manufacturing perspective, I'm going to have a key performance indicator to give me a measurement of overall defects for a month, right? I will have a key performance indicator on lines picked for the month, on lines shipped for the month, to align it with that strategic objective to have optimal customer service, optimal customer service levels. You will also have in terms of mispicks and things like that. So as you can see, those metrics, those daily metrics, those day-to-day tactical metrics are inputs to those long-term key performance indicators. Okay, so in discussing that, do you all have anything like that within your organization? Where you have a board on the wall, or you get daily reports or monthly reports of any kind of measurement from your organization. So, Angela, for your weekly KPIs, do you have daily metrics that are kind of somewhat fed into those KPIs? Have daily KPI department run metrics for all departments. Perfect. All right, Joseph's still typing. I'm gonna let Joseph type before I answer my next question. All right. So while Joseph is typing, so for those metrics, for those key performance indicators, now do you find yourself and your peers working toward those? And this is going to be a lead in to my next question. Excuse our forecast. Yep. And that is kind of how what it relates. So yeah, so my manager at McDonald's Corporation, they want to know all the information, all the information that goes into each shift at the end of the day. Yep. So those are the metrics. So Joseph, for those daily metrics, are those sent? How are those distributed? How are those communicated? Are they like daily reports sent to the McDonald's managers for each one of those store or each one of those locations? And Eden, please, yeah, Eden, yeah, hold that thought because that's exactly what I'm going to touch on next. So my next question, which is what Eden was referring to, is that what are the benefits and drawbacks to publishing those metrics? Now, I would say that organizations use metrics because there is a common saying that what doesn't get measured doesn't get done, right? But to Eden's point, you kind of have that, and I always relate it to like a car dealership, where you would walk into a car dealership and you see all the salespeople's names on the wall, and you have the each month and it outlines how many cars they sold. So yes, it's a game, it's a competition, it's a friendly competition, right? But since we're a small business working for large truck repairs, yeah, so I like that gamification environment for certain industries. Now I'm going to say that there's no one size fits all approach because that kind of publishing of those metrics does not work too well in some environments. And what I mean by that is that you have different priorities for different employees. So in some environments where someone may be in the top in the bottom 10, for example, right? They may be spending 5% of their time working on, actually customer service related activities. They may be working on strategic activities for the organization. They may be working on training a new employee, right? So that quantitative aspect is just one piece of the puzzle. And I always want to stress that when we're talking about key performance indicators as metrics, as the key performance indicators and metrics are only the quant piece, only the quantitative piece, right? Another important piece is that qualitative piece. And that qualitative piece is what I was referring to with that one employee that is training another employee, right? So since their priorities have been shifted to more strategic administrative roles, their quantitative numbers aren't going to be good, but their qualitative aspects are going to be phenomenal because now they are demonstrating those leadership competencies, those managerial competencies to their manager to show them now it's time for them to take the next step within the organization, right? I'm not looking at those numbers, right? I'm not that concerned with those numbers because now they are providing more value in training others. So I'm gonna go through here real quick. There's a lot of stuff coming through. Metrics can influence negative behaviors, and that's another point that I was trying to make, where we talk about gamification, right? We're trying to beat each other, right? But with that gamification, with that competition, there are also drawbacks in that in order to hit those numbers, I'm going to try to game the system. I'm going to try to find a way to keep my numbers high, right? And in doing that, I am sacrificing customer service levels. I am sacrificing quality. So those are essentially the drawbacks to those customer service, those metrics and key performance indicators. Now, I have been faced with this in some environments where, we would review, like in a warehouse, for example, we would review the number of lines picked for certain people, right? And because that organization was not tracking a number of mispicks, they thought these two employees were rock stars, right? But whenever we added the additional metric of mispicks, right, and customer returns, and once we dug into the data to see who actually picked that item, we seen our top performers had the largest mispicks, right? I also use sports as an analogy where I could have a basketball player scoring 50 points a game, but their shooting percentage is 30%, right? So they're taking a large percentage of the shots. They're taking more shots than the rest of the team combined. Of course they're gonna score 50 points. They're taking all the shots. So you have to look at the benefits and drawbacks of these metrics and kind of counter that gaming the system mindset, because it's going to arise, because, and as managers you have to understand that, where if your employees are going to be measured by a number of calls taken, right, by the number of picks within the warehouse, they're going to try to hit that number without regard for the quality of the service in which they're performing. So one excellent call out on that one. So Eden, we can all check the daily metrics on our devices each week. The metrics are distinct. So to that point, Eden, a lot of ERP systems have this built in. I think I mentioned this before, where you can create metrics, and within those metrics, you have thresholds where those thresholds say, okay, once I go above a number or once I go below a number, depending on the metric, I want to send an alert to my manager, right? So I am not going to concern myself with all of the employees that are hitting their numbers or they're within the thresholds, right? On the metrics on the day-to-day perspective. I may do it from a KPI perspective because I want to acknowledge those employees that are doing great day after day in and day out. But for those employees that are below target or are above the threshold, for like mispicks, for example, if I'm doing 5 mispicks, if I'm above 5 mispicks, I want to get an alert, right? So you have those critical numbers that gives alerts to managers within an organization. And sorry for the background noise. I got a 2-month-old at the house. If you can hear that, she just woke up and going crazy. But if you have those thresholds in place, you can make these key performance indicators more meaningful. Okay, and then you can increase your efficiencies and you can improve your managerial decision making if you set those alerts in place. Okay, so Eden, that's an excellent point in that you can essentially automate this process to say, okay, these key performance indicators and metrics aren't just reports that just show up in my inbox and I delete them, or I show up in my inbox, I hold them, and I only have to refer back to them whenever I need to, when there's a problem, right? Being reactive. I can now be proactive and be alerted when a certain situation needs to be acted upon. Okay. Angela, we're focused on growing larger accounts to boost the key performance indicators. So again, so Angela, with that, is that a good thing or a bad thing? What's the drawbacks in that? Over 100. So building on last week, our company does the same quality work for $100 or a $500 job. We build quality and excellence in the service we provide. Yes, and that's the way it should be, because that $100 account can turn into $1 million account, because as you develop that, and this goes back to like those supplier relationships, right? So as you build and create that long-term partnership with that supplier, once that supplier goes from a $10 million company to a $1 billion company, right? They're bringing you along for the ride, right? You develop that partnership, you develop that synergy, so that $100 account is going to turn into $1 million account. So you do not sacrifice quality just for the level of project, right? Or the level of service that you're providing to that client. Um, all right. Anything else on metrics and KPIs? So if we look at it from, because we're looking at it from an operational and service perspective, but let's look at metrics from a supply chain perspective. And from a supply chain perspective, those short-term, day-to-day tactical metrics are going to be used to identify and measure your supply chain and logistics processes. So again, going back to those number of lines picked, going back to the number of mispicks, going back to the number of orders filled, right? That's that day-to-day tactical number that our organization is going to monitor daily, right? So if I'm normally picking 100 lines a day and it goes down to 20 lines, I have a problem. I have a problem, right? And that is where that alert will get kicked off, that alert will get triggered so that you can act upon it. Whereas if we're only looking at number of lines picked as a key performance indicator, and we're only seeing that we went from 100 lines to 20 lines at the end of the month, it's too late, right? So that is kind of that difference and the importance of why you have to have both metrics and key performance indicators. And also, again, as you're going to be proactive with those with those metrics, I should say, that is going to create those continuous improvement opportunities, right? So if we are averaging 100 lines a week, right, from a continuous improvement standpoint, we're going to say, okay, how do we get to 110 lines a week without sacrificing quality, right? Without increasing our number of mispicks, right? So we now have to create a new goal, and we can incentivize our people to hit that goal. But you also have the disclaimer in that we want to increase the number of lines. Our mispick level is at X. And if you increase it to 110, and your number of mispicks are not impacted, you get this bonus, right? So you kind of have to add in both sides of things, where you have to increase the efficiency without sacrificing quality. So again, they're important. I think they're very most important because you're able to find opportunities for improvement. You're able to be proactive in addressing a problem, because again, I can be proactive in addressing a problem if I get daily reports on my metrics, and if I get daily alerts on if I'm below or above a certain threshold. And as opposed to you looking at wait until the end of the month or wait until the end of the week for those KPIs to come in, right? So I think the most important piece from my perspective, from my experience in doing this for literally hundreds of companies, is that you're being proactive, and you are enabling yourself to tackle and address an issue. Okay. Let's see here. What other questions? So with our suppliers, uptick in delivery, those excellence those indicators. Let's see. Supply money is tied up in safety supply. We have been working on speaking with them. Yeah, so we're going to get to those external metrics. We're going to get to those external supplier metrics shortly in terms of supplier scorecards and things like that. We're tracking missed pulls and pick ticket issues as part of our master data management project. So whenever you say you have a master data management project, Amber, are you implementing a new ERP system? So while Amber's typing that up, so whenever we're talking about metrics, oh, business intelligence, yeah, perfect. E-commerce, okay. Yep. So yeah, going back to Amber's statement, whenever you are doing those master data management exercises, you will be surprised the number of errors you find in terms of your data. It's a given. It's a given for any project that I've worked with. I mean, I've worked in this discipline for 20 years. I wrote a book on ERP systems, so I've seen the good, bad, and dysfunctional. So whenever you're going through this exercise, all of this information that we're going through should be within consideration of, what you're going through right now, Amber. Now, as you can probably see within your ERP system, one item master record has 200 different fields in it, right? And if you input incorrect data into one field, right, that field looks so meaningless, it can create havoc on your supply chain. For example, if I fat finger a lead time, my lead time is 10 days, I put in 100. That's a problem with my forecasting. How am I stocked out? If I go and dig, my lead time's 100 days, right? Or my lead time's 10 days, either or, right? And I've seen that time and time again. Where we're stocking out because our lead times are incorrect, or our economic order quantities are incorrect, or our pricing is incorrect, or we don't have a supplier in the system, right? So it's very important from that master data management. Master data management is probably one of the most important pieces to supply chain management and ERP applications. It runs. It's that foundational data. It's that source data that pretty much runs your organization. But going back to metrics. And going back to that, the data, the item setup, the master data management is the driver for these metrics, right? So that foundational data, your customer record, your supplier record, your item master record, if you're in manufacturing, your bill of material, those are the master data elements that are going to drive your system. That's going to drive the managerial decision making of your organization. So it has to be as accurate as possible. And in some organizations, we have people who that's their full-time job, master data management analysts, right? To modify those records, to update those lead times, to update those safety stock levels, to update the pricing, right? So that's why it's very important. And again, those are inputs into these metrics, in that once I identify my metrics, they need to be specific. Right? So if I want to reduce my costs, going back to that master data management record, or if I want to reduce my amount of inventory, going back to that data management record, if my optimal inventory levels for my items are incorrect, if my safety stock levels for my items are incorrect, my metrics are incorrect. Right? So the master data management is the foundation of these metrics, and those metrics have to be very specific, right? If I want to say I want to reduce my inventory levels, okay, by how much? If I reduce it by 1%, I reduced it. I've met my goal, right? But that might be meaningless to me. So it needs to be specific, where I want to reduce on-hand inventory levels. I want to reduce the amount of missed picks by a certain percentage by a specific date. Okay, so that's just a very important piece in terms of the metrics, so that you have something to work to, and it's very specific and it's time bound. Okay. Going back, so Amber, it's worth assessing 110, 100% rule when trying to determine whether to clean the data. Yeah, so yeah, that 110, 100 is very important. So yeah, so my data accuracy for my screws that are a fraction of a cent, it's not as important as my $1 million, product. Also, it has to do with how much of this item makes up my total inventory, and how much of this item do I move? Right? If I have an item with a high movability that I move it every day, I want to make sure that that data is spot on. Right? Even if it's a screw of a fraction of a cent, but I move it every day and I move it by tens of thousands of pieces every day, I want to make sure that my sales price is accurate. Okay. So again, those metrics need to be very specific in nature. And they're also short-term objectives for metrics in terms of what we refer to as a balanced scorecard, where if we're talking about supply chain management, organizations, even professionals I work with, even graduate students that I work with that are leaders in organizations, they're primarily looking at increasing efficiencies. They're looking at your manufacturing costs. They're looking at your purchasing costs whenever you're looking at developing metrics, right? But if you look at the balanced scorecard, you're looking at multiple areas of the organization. So you're looking at the financial impacts of your metrics. So how do these metrics impact me financially? How are they important to my finance department, my accounting department? Right? How are these metrics impacting innovation? How are they impacting my research and development department? How are they impacting our day-to-day operations? So again, that goes outside of me making a product and shipping a product. How does it impact how I increase efficiencies, how I strive for continuous improvement for my organization? And then finally, and I think most importantly, is how does it impact my customer service levels, right? How does it impact my supplier relationships? So those are considerations when developing a balanced scorecard. And Angela, you are correct in that it's a trickle up and trickle down effect. Again, it's upstream and downstream, right? It's internal and external. And you're going to see that. We talked about that in week one, where we talked about, the importance of upstream and downstream collaboration. But you again, it's going to be internal and external, right? And it's going to be upstream and downstream. Okay, in terms of that collaboration, in terms of that visibility. So also the benefits to aligning metrics with that operational strategy is to find ways to benchmark against the best in the business, right? So, you work in an organization. So, let's take McDonald's for example. I'm pretty sure that, somebody in here, somebody on this meeting will say that McDonald's is the best in the restaurant business, right? So, without understanding the metrics, I would believe you. Now, if that is the case, I'm pretty sure that McDonald's is not the best in every single metric. You're not going to be able to be the best in everything. Okay. Some may argue that, but I disagree. So for those metrics where Burger King is higher than McDonald's, then that's where you can look at that metric and say, how does Burger King get to that level? Right? So you want to benchmark based on the best in class for a particular metric. Okay, so that's where those metrics are important, and that's what is going to be the foundation. That's what's going to be the baseline for your continuous improvement efforts from a metrics perspective. I'm pretty sure Joseph said something about that one. Let me see here. All right. So again, we want to talk about those metrics and how they're measured. We talked about the balanced scorecard, but there's also a score model that you can actually find in those course resources. That is also the that provides you with a playbook for measuring your metrics. So so you can look at that. You can look at that content within the course resources on the score model, as well as there's additional information on the balanced scorecard. So we did talk about, the difference between the internal and external metrics, and I think that some of the more specific metrics that you are measured upon, and there is a caption up here that says you should identify 3 to 5 metrics per area. So per department, it's important to call out 3 to 5 metrics. I have cautioned people and I have proven my assumptions in that once you start bringing in 10 different metrics for a department, they begin to be ignored. Okay. So if you're entering in those critical numbers, if you're entering those thresholds, then, the management of that particular department is getting 15, 20 different emails a day. So they're ignoring them. So it's important to have a discussion with your departments, with your peers, with your workers to say what should be the 3 to 5 max most important daily measurements that should be tracked on a day-to-day basis, right? And once you have identified that, those are the metrics that are the move forward plan for each department. Okay. Now, again, it's important to note that these metrics, in most cases, I'm not going to say it's the end all be all, but in most cases, 90% of the time, those metrics are inputs to your key performance indicators. So once you identify those metrics, you need to work with your leadership team, right, to say, okay, these are the 5 metrics that we're going to measure our day-to-day operations by. And are these going to be something that you want rolled up into some type of key performance indicator report for you to see, kind of catch the pulse of the department, right? So for accounting, outstanding receivables, outstanding payables, things like that. Sales for the week, things like that. For logistics, mispicks, line shipped, out of stock orders, right? So you're gonna measure that on a daily basis, but leadership also wants to see the snapshot, the high level, the weekly, the monthly number on that, so that they can measure it and see if there's a particular trend. Something's trending up, something's trending down. Okay, why is that? So the point is I'm trying to make is that those metrics need to be aligned with the key performance indicators of the organization. Okay, so we'll do our best in the field we're in. Love that. I'm building my project dashboard, and it will be a major help. So Amber, yes, those project dashboards are essentially, yes, your KPIs and your metrics. You in most ERP systems right now have about 100 metrics and KPIs out of the box. I have rarely had to create a metric or a key performance indicator, so it's almost like a plug and play. And the only modification you have to do is to identify those thresholds. So those levels in which you want to have an alert. So that's kind of the only modification you have to do in most systems. I won't say all, I would say most. Um, but yeah, those project dashboards are very helpful. And one thing that I've done in the past is, I've create so there's functions in most systems called auto runs or preloads, or they all name it something different, but they perform the same function. Where as soon as you sign into your system, it brings up that dashboard. So once you log in for the day, you get a quick snapshot of what happened yesterday, right? So yes, you'll get alerts via email, but once you log in, you can see exactly specifically where that problem lies. CRM software is very helpful for tracking for meeting purposes. Absolutely. So Salesforce, for example, at another institution, we use Salesforce for our student interactions. So if I have a student for example, one of my peers, he just bought a house this week, so he's off this week because he's moving. So I have his pool of students, right? So if a student's reaching out to me for a call, I just go into Salesforce, see all the interactions that Dr. Joseph had with that student, and we have our conversation, pick up where we left off. Right. So that communication, that visibility is very important. And that's what I talk about with that visibility and communication for an organization. So again, that's the metrics. Those internal and external metrics are very important. Do not go above 5. My suggestion, you can go to 10, but again, it gets to the point where those metrics are essentially ignored. So you also want to assess process performance in that you want to understand what the activities are and the flows are, where once you understand those flows, once you understand the opportunities for improvement, you want to measure and track those opportunities for improvement. Right. So without understanding the full plot process, the full flow of a particular work stream, you're not going to be able to do that. Right. So that's what we're referring to here, where we want to identify the principles of process performance and understand our process. Right. Time and time, I cannot tell you how many times where I'm in a boardroom with the leaders of an organization, and they're outlining the steps of an order to cash process. Right. So order to cash is from the time that customer places the order, from the time that order ships out of the warehouse. Right. And they're walking me through it. But if I bring in an end user, somebody who's doing it every single day, that leader forgot 5 or 6 different steps that are important. Right. So that is a point where, you need to understand every single step of the process, because without getting a full picture, you may be ignoring an area for improvement that needs to be measured and acted upon. All right. So that's what we're referring to here. So if you're understanding each step of the process, is going back to order to cash, we have a concept which we refer to as a theory of constraints. If you want to know more about the theory of constraints, just go into Google and type in Goldratt, Goldratt. And you'll see that he developed a concept such as the theory of constraints, where we're essentially laying out all the processes, seeing where the bottlenecks lie, which is the constraint. We want to expose that constraint, and we want to eliminate that bottleneck, right? So where we have inefficiencies, where we have mispicks, where we have a lot of wait time, we want to expose that and eliminate it, right? Once we have eliminated it, we want to create a metric to see if that improvement or if that change has improved the process, has increased the efficiency of the process. So that's it. Again, you can go find more information on theory of constraints. And I think that there is a decent, there's a lot of content on theory of constraints in this week's discussion, or this week's content, I should say. So we talked about order to cash, as a process flow, but this screen here, or this slide here, outlines other processes, and it's very important to note, and we're going to go through this in more detail in the Six Sigma and Lean Week, where when you're mapping out a process, you should never, ever, ever, ever map out my entire organizational operational process in one process map. Right? You need to pick out one work stream. So for example, a work stream is shipping and receiving. Everything that goes into from the time that I, again, place the order to the time I ship it, or from the time the customer places the order, or from the time that I place the order to the time I put it away in my warehouse, those are two different work streams. right? Warehousing would be, if I am replenishing inventory, so I'm taking inventory from an overstock location and put it into my primary pick location. And then from a sourcing perspective, you have those steps of customer relationship management to customer supplier management. So at all the steps it takes for me to find a prospect, right, to the time that they become a customer or to the time that they place their first order, all the steps that go into that process should be mapped out. Those inefficiencies should be identified, and we should reduce or eliminate those efficiencies. Okay, so again, those processes need to be specific individual work streams for an organization. And then here are just some metrics. Again, some day-to-day operational metrics that you can find in different industries. So again, so for our McDonald's example, for Joseph here, you have the amount of food thrown out, from a financial perspective. What is the cost of the food I'm throwing out each night per location, right? The number of late supplier deliveries. How many times is my truck showing up, late? How many times or how many times am I in my field short? How many lines are shorted? How many lines of orders do I not receive from each truck, from each vendor, for example, from each distribution center, for example? So those are some the metrics, day-to-day metrics that can be used based on industry. And again, those metrics are going to be inputs into our key performance indicators. So Joseph, do you use like some kind of like just-in-time approach, or do you have like some type of min-max type reorder point or remake point, if you will? Like once burgers get down to like 10, you start making more. I've always wondered how that worked in the McDonald's. Okay. So in terms of supplier performance management, we're actually going to talk about continuous improvement, Lean and Six Sigma in week 5. I normally get on the tangent on this one, normally in 30 minutes. So we're just going to kind of table that one until week 5 before we go into more detail, because that week is only attributed to Lean and Six Sigma. The thing I want to talk about here from a supplier relationship perspective are the 3 types of supplier relationships, in that we have that transactional, collaborative, and strategic supplier relationship. And with our transactional supplier relationship, that is going back to my screw example. So if I have a screw supplier, a fastener supplier, I'm not too concerned with developing a strategic relationship with that supplier, right? I just want to order my screws and receive my screws. As long as they show up on time, I don't care, right? So it's strictly transactional. There's no strategic relationship. There's no partnership. With a collaborative relationship, we are collaborating on a project or a product where we're working with each other's R&D departments, right, to develop a particular item. So for example, I think I mentioned this company before, where I had an aerospace client where they partnered or developed a collaborative relationship with Rolls-Royce. So this manufacturer made blades for the Rolls-Royce turbines that go on the side of the plane. So Rolls-Royce R&D personnel work with my client's personnel to say, okay, we need to increase the thickness by 0.003 millimeters, something crazy like that, right? So they work together, they collaborate together to provide a solution to an issue in production, right? So it's developing that partnership, it's developing that synergy among business partners. With a strategic relationship, it's more of that long-term relationship. This happens a lot with startups, right? So with startups, you develop a strategic relationship in that you both have shared risk, shared responsibility, shared reward, right? So you both have essentially skin in the game where you are working with each other to develop products because the success of or failure of the product will directly impact all parties, right? So that is where that strategic supplier relationship is very important, and there is a higher level of collaboration than the previous example. So going back to metrics, we also talk about our supplier relationship management, where you have those for supplier relationship management applications. So similar to Salesforce for customer relationship management, you have supplier relationship management applications, and in most cases, ERP applications develop these SRM applications, which they sometimes call supplier portals, where you can directly link to your ERP system to provide your supplier real time visibility into your inventory levels in which you buy from that supplier. Right. So again, it's a win-win in that the supplier can be proactive in planning the production for the raw materials because they have direct insight into your products. So they say, "Oh, he's getting close to his reorder point. Now let me begin to load and plan my production for these products." Right. So also in extension to that, you also have those supplier scorecards. So on time deliveries, defects per shipment, number of lines shipped. So because we're inputting all that data into our ERP system and it's providing a direct feed to our supplier portal, because our supplier scorecard is built into our supplier portal, again, at any given point in time, that supplier is getting real time KPIs, right? So or real time metric, I should say. And they're also getting those key performance indicators as well. Now, this provides leverage for your organization in that you can now increase your negotiating power. So if their on-time deliveries are low, if it's trending down, if the number of lines shipped fulfilled are trending down, so whenever you're negotiating new prices, now you have the data, right? That doesn't lie, right? Numbers don't lie. So that real time, and also so that to that point, if there is any kind of discrepancy, based on what the supplier had in their ERP system versus what you have in your ERP system, then those discrepancies can be resolved, and that way you're not prolonging the AP process, right? So that visibility is very important. And supplier scorecards, again, a lot of ERP systems have it, but the drawback is that a lot of organizations don't implement it. Sometimes you have the wrong personality in the wrong position doesn't make lesser employee an impact to everything you're speaking about. Angela, you're exactly correct, and I would say that is that's the rule, not the exception, not the exception. Because some people have that power struggle, and that they're kind of using their power for negative outcomes, I would say. And again, this is not my opinion. This is my experiences in working with hundreds of organizations in this capacity, and exactly what we're talking about. So you hit the nail on the head with that statement. And also it depends on the organizational environment as well. But I think that with with the current environment, with the current landscape, with all the things that are going on, I think that you're going to see it's not going to be 100%, but I think that you're going to see some changes for in a good way in the coming. It's not going to be overnight. I would say in the coming years. Okay, in terms of increasing emotional intelligence within leaders, in terms of increasing empathy within leaders, in terms of increasing what I'm about to talk about, corporate social responsibility and sustainability, my favorite topic. So corporate social responsibility. Who's heard of that? Who's heard of that term? All right. So corporate social responsibility. If you're interested in it, I actually did a roundtable discussion at Georgetown University back in March, I believe, during the pandemic. So if you go to YouTube, type in Georgetown supply chain, it'll come up, and we talk about the impacts and positive outcomes of the pandemic. And because I'm creating a corporate social responsibility and supply chain course for Georgetown, I think that it's going to increase in importance for organizations because customer perceptions are having an increased impact and increased influence on managerial decision making. There was one study that I spoke about that said that 85% of consumers would switch their loyal brands based primarily on if one organization had sustainable practices, corporate social responsibility practices, ethical practices, versus their loyal brand that didn't. Right. So for example, it does not matter. It does not matter about political affiliation. It does not matter about political affiliation. But there have been a number of consumers that were loyal Trump Hotels fans that have switched their uh, preferred hotel, based on President Trump running for office. Right. So I'm not saying that he is not ethical. I am not saying anything about that. I am going back to client perceptions. Right. It's all about perception. So it goes to that image, the risk to that organizational image, and that's where corporate social responsibility comes into play. Now, corporate social responsibility, the foundation of corporate social responsibility is based on a triple bottom line, where the triple bottom line is composed of people, planet, and profit. Where you have the importance of people, you have the respect for people, you have the empowerment of a workforce as a primary objective. You have the positive contribution to the environment as a primary objective, and then the profits will follow. Okay. Now, in one of my favorite TED talks, Alex Edmonds from the University of London did a longitudinal study, a long-term study, where he looked at the top 100 companies to work for in the United States, and he found that those companies who had corporate social responsibility programs in place outperformed their competitors by 2 to 3% year over year for the last 15 years. Now, that does not seem like a large number, but within a sector, you're going to have growth, right? So even those that are number two, they had growth. But those organizations where traditionally, organization or stakeholders felt that if you're providing increased capital into sustainable practices, if you're providing increased capital into educating your employees, right, increased capital into healthcare, increased capital into time off, you're taking the money away from my bottom line, right? You're taking the money away from my profits. You're taking the money away from my stock. But those who did that continue to beat their competitors who only focused on profitability. Right. So that is a very important study, especially for me, because that is a research interest of mine, in that this shift in focus has been a positive outcome of organizations. KP focus on. So, Lauren, you're talking about Kaiser? Importance of retention of employees and maybe able to shift to them in the lateral role, retain money they spend in. So yeah, so Angela, to that point, there's a study out there that said that if an employee leaves, it takes 3 times that employee's salary to replace that employee for that role, right? So that kind of validates your point to organizations need to have an increased focus on the people to keep their employees, to continue to invest in their time off, invest in their health care, invest in their education, because if they stay, that $10,000 tuition reimbursement is going to save them in the end, right? From a strategic perspective, it's going to save them millions. Because, this, to me, the sad part is that for organizations where I've instituted education reimbursement programs, nobody uses them, unfortunately. But hopefully you all have looked into those reimbursement programs, because I tell people, I say, just like your 401k matching, if you don't take advantage of those reimbursement programs, you're leaving money on the ground. You're flushing money down the toilet. They're giving it to you. Why not take advantage of it? I say that I have 2 masters. I'm going for a third one because I get an 80% discount in the institution. You can never have too much education. And I tell people that yes, I am never, because I'm getting a master's in data analytics, and I say yes, I'm never going to write a single line of code. But now I can better understand those use cases for artificial intelligence and for machine learning, right? With that education. And then I can just put, and that is personal development for me. And I just put that degree in my back pocket when I need it. Right. So I mean, I have a different view on education because I'm passionate about education, but I just say that take advantage of those tuition reimbursement programs at your organization now and moving forward. So even after you get out of this undergraduate program, if you have an organization that is contributing to your education, take advantage of it. Take advantage of it, because a lot of organizations don't. So again, with sustainability in supply chain, I think that, let's see here. Yeah, so with education within supply chain, I would say that sustainability is most prevalent in the supply chain industry, because you have unethical practices overseas. You have business partners where you can't monitor every single business partner. So, for example, maybe you've heard of Foxconn. So, Foxconn was a manufacturer of Apple products, and they had, I will not go into the details, but they had a situation, I will say, where they had an issue with unethical practices with employees. How I'll put it, where they were fined for it, but then because it was Apple's, they were making Apple products. Apple also had to pay a fine. All right. So Tim, yes, Tim, I'll see you next week. So that this corporate social responsibility is very important from an ethical perspective, in that even if your business partners are acting unethically, it can have a negative impact. It can have a negative reflection on your organization. Okay, so where all these sustainable practices come into play, because you have that respect for people. You also have the environmental factors that come into play. Amazon was in the news about a year ago about unethical practices in Indonesia, I believe, or somewhere, some developing country like that. But I'm not sure if I can stop ordering from Amazon, right? But others have seen that story, and that has turned them to go to Walmart, for example. So it has there's a certain level of risk, in not monitoring your business partners from a corporate social responsibility perspective. So when we talk about sustainable practices, we talked about this from an upstream and downstream perspective. And you'll also hear the term the circular economy, circular supply chains, and that whole term circular supply chains come from, the recycling logo, where you have waste, right? You have packaging, you have the pallets, you have the empty boxes, and this circular economy essentially says that, okay, I'm going to send this waste. I'm going to send these broken products back upstream. I'm going to send these products back up to my suppliers. And that way, those suppliers can recycle those products. That way, those suppliers can take those. So I always use the example of car batteries. So when your car battery goes dead, you take it to AutoZone and you get a core charge. You get some money back for a dead battery. What AutoZone does is they send that dead battery back to the car manufacturer or the battery manufacturer, and that manufacturer breaks down that that dead battery to reuse the products out of it, right? So they'll grind down the shell, they'll grind down the internal pieces of the battery and reuse it, right? So that is essentially what we're referring to as a circular economy, in that we are recycling and reusing spent, broken, refurbished products. So whenever you go on Amazon and you'll see a product that's $30 cheaper than a new product and it says refurbished, that's exactly what it is. So that item, like a iPad, right? Screen was broken on an iPad. They send it back to Apple. Apple replaces the screen, refurbished iPad for $30 cheaper, right? $100 cheaper. So again, that's circular supply chains, right? Instead of just throwing that broken iPhone, iPad in the trash, I send it back to Apple. They put new products, and they put new raw materials on it and ship it back out and resell it, right? So that is what we're talking about in terms of sustainable practices. Because in doing that, we are reducing our carbon footprint. We are reducing the amount of electronics in landfills. And which in turn will create a more sustainable planet, I will say. Okay. Be a core for our organization, but we don't call products cores. So Angela, what do you let's see here? Be a core within our organization. They don't call product cores for a reason we can. I'm not understanding that comment, Angela. So to wrap up this discussion, again, you're gonna hear more about supply chain sustainability, because supply chain management, the supply chain departments, is kind of somewhat of the jumping off point for sustainable practices, because it goes into the products, it goes into the processes, it goes into the supply chain area. Employs the largest amount of people in certain organizations. So the supply chain is a large have provides a large influence, a large impact for organizations. Any questions? Angela responded, like a battery, and we add juice into a machine. Yes, exactly. All right. So if there's no more questions, thank you for attending tonight's session. If you have